I don't know whether it interests you or not, but the Screen Actors Guild or SAG Awards were announced yesterday. The Academy Awards and Grammys and whatever have their in memoriam list of people who died during the year.
Yep.
And Gulpilil was on it.
Oh, awesome. How beautiful is that?
Like, obviously, I guess he would have had to been a member of Screen Actors Guild, but just that level of respect and recognition smacked me right in the face when I saw it. It's a shame that I didn't expect it.
Well, hello there and welcome back to the Eloquent in the Room podcast. I'm Rose Cooper and I've been away for a little while. Towards the end of 2021, I was feeling a bit burnt out from doing regular scheduled podcasts every fortnight. I do put a lot of work and energy into them. Editing is a big job, particularly if you, like I, was trying to do it all in one day. And I'm a bit burnt out from that brain taxing exercise and just generally feeling the pressure of a lot of stimuli from the year, lack of stimuli from various lockdowns. I kicked off the year by getting COVID, all the stress that I know everyone is feeling at various times during the last 2 years, so I don't need to elaborate too much. But I just wanted to down tools as far as the podcast was concerned and take some time off for my 60th birthday, which I did, and Christmas and just mental health break, basically. Having said that, I simultaneously threw myself into more social media content creation. I joined TikTok back in May, but I really just sat back and watched it and sort of worked out the bells and whistles and worked out the kind of content creators that I wanted to follow and learn from and just figure out who I was going to be on that particular app. It's all about niche. You're supposed to narrow down your target audience and all that sort of stuff. And anybody who has listened to this podcast or followed me on Instagram knows that my niche is kind of like a decahedron. It's multifaceted, multi-pronged. I'm all over the place. The only thing I can narrow it down to is I'm a creative person who likes to do things that have a specific point to them, consciousness raising, wise, and humour. I like to make people laugh. So that's me just reestablishing what the fuck I'm on about here. And along the way, I kind of started to enjoy TikTok. But these things can be a bit addictive, I've got to say. It's a little bit too easy to become that person who scrolls a lot and starts to spit out content like watermelon seeds. And it does get like that. So I'm readjusting my coordinates again to focus on other things. Some folks may remember that I was recording an EP. That has been hard to organise, but it's coming. It's coming. I will have a release date shortly, but in the meantime, as for the podcast, I'm not going to be putting them out fortnightly. I'm going to let them happen organically. I'm going to do what feels right and talk to people that I know that will make me feel challenged, not directly, sort of just push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit to have conversations that I don't necessarily feel like I'm the best person to be leading the conversation. So to that end, I am extremely thrilled to say my first guest for 2022 is the delightful Debbie Ballangarry, who is a proud Indigenous woman. I met her on TikTok and immediately connected with her energy, with her sense of humour, and with her advocacy and also her energy as an elder. And I regard myself as an elder, and on TikTok I'm doing a lot of stuff that's about fighting ageism and defying age stereotypes and all that sort of garbage. And I say garbage because I do have to be the muse for that, and it requires me to be kind of more physically active and involved and be a spokesperson with my face, not just my voice, and jump on those TikTok trends and invert them or subvert them, twist them to my narrative. And, I'm having fun with it, but, I'm very wary of getting a little bit too addicted. Anybody who's been following TikTok lately will know that there's been a big drama unfolding over the past week. I'm not going to go into that today. I may do so at a later date after it's blown over a bit. And I would like to talk more about my creative stuff that I am thinking about doing and that I'm definitely doing throughout the year, but I will just throw to this interview first. Oh, and by the way, I will pop in a link into the show notes regarding David Gulpilil, a wonderful Aboriginal dancer and powerful actor. His impressive body of work spanned 50 years. Right, so I met Deb on TikTok. Look, I just said, do you want to come on the podcast? And she said yes. And I don't feel well enough equipped to pinpoint what should she and I talk about specifically. I just knew that I wanted to have the privilege of talking to an Indigenous woman and just see what happened, And she was keen and she just said, look, let's just play it by ear and have a yarn. I am a typical white Aussie, descended from convicts and immigrants. I have a lot of English, Scottish and that in my blood, but I associate myself with my Irish heritage. I can't tell you why, just that it's a spiritual vibe that I have been drawn to over the last few decades since I found out I was descended from Irish convicts. And I was really fucking stoked when I found that out. But otherwise, as an Australian, I struggle with my identity. I feel like a tourist. I feel like an interloper. I don't feel comfortable. I hate Australia Day. I'm trying to step up my own advocacy in that regard. I do some stuff, but it's not enough. We can all do better. Having said that, as you'll note in the conversation I have with Debbie, I'm not completely devoid of knowledge of the culture and the identities and stuff, just some general superficial stuff at best, which is to say I feel like I've largely overcome my white fragility, but what remains is just being deathly afraid of putting my fucking feet in my mouth and saying anything that could possibly offend an Indigenous person. So that's my fragility, that's my insecurity. And I set out to overcome that by just having a chat. So what you're going to hear is just two Australians having a chat. We're a decade apart in age, but we're cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. We rambled on a fair bit, went off on a lot of tangents. So the editing of this has been a challenge. We did go off on tangents, like I say. So to keep a cohesive narrative, I've chopped it up a bit. So what I will do is pop in the occasional clarification in real time, interspersed through the interview, and a little bit of musical interludes here and there, just so you know that this was the point at which I edited and took out a bit and the conversation changes a little bit in character. Okay, so are you with me? Cool. Now it's my privilege to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which I record this podcast, the Darug people. I would love to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. All right, let's get into it. Here is me and Aunty Deb. Obviously, we've been around the block a few times, so for me to say, tell me your life story, we could be here for a while.
You don't want to hear it. That's a whole drama series in itself.
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested in, seeing that on the screen. But, how did you get into, because I know you're into linguistics now, was that your entry point, or where did you get into academia as stuff that you're interested in?
Well, I was working, I worked very privately for a lot of years, just privately, just working in a warehouse, so just working in an office. So I was a private worker, and I moved from Sydney, where I'd lived for 20 years, to Western Victoria, Western Victoria. And I thought, well, while I'm here, I might as well try and see if I can get into the community sector, So I got a job just as a medical receptionist. So, whoa, did my eyes and my world open up, because wow, you finally get all of the understanding and start to see all of the issues and problems and understanding funding, and all of a sudden that everyday stuff of going to work and coming home is not like that anymore. It's like it becomes in your blood, if you know what I mean. So that sort of started me actually doing courses, and I was 30-something by then, or 30-something. And so I thought, oh, yeah, we'll do that. And then when I came and moved here and I moved to Tari over 10 years ago. And, of course, I got another job and more more courses came along and kept coming. And then eventually I've always wanted to learn my language since I was young, and I couldn't. And I remember I was in Sydney when they first opened the language centre and first opened the place to come and be able to learn it. But for me to learn it and become a teacher, I had to move home, and I couldn't afford to move home. I had no one or family, none of my mum or dad lived there in that area anymore. So I couldn't afford to leave. I had to work. And I just bought a car. So there was like things I couldn't do, but it was always in the back of my mind. So I decided I couldn't do it then. And then when I was at work, this guy was walking around saying, hey, anybody want to come and learn Garang, which is the local language of the Biripi people? And I said, I would love to. Thinking in my head then, the whole thought process was, if I can learn this, maybe I can read my language or understand, thinking, are all Aboriginal languages the same? Or maybe I don't know. I had the dictionary, like I've had every dictionary from my mob, but looking at them, you got this feeling of NG sounds and what is this sound? Or how come that, hey, that doesn't make sense, when you try and say dare, or, oh no, Dalroy. And it's like, hang on, that don't make no sense. Those sounds aren't making sense. So when I got our language, when I learnt Garang, I was like, my cousin was learning our language at the same time. She ended up going and learning ours, and I said, great, I want to go up and do it. So I want to try and work out how I can do that. And unfortunately at that time I couldn't go up and learn my language again, so I still continued on learning Garang, and I loved it. But my cousin said to me, Deb, I'm going off to university to get this to be the first Gumbayngira qualified linguist. And I said, she said, why don't you come? Why don't we do it together? And I'm like, you know what? Yep, I could do this. I've really just I've just been made redundant from my job, and I've taken redundancy because of years of crap. So, yeah, I could do this. But, of course, I'm nervous Nelly. So, and I got in, and my passion is the fact that I didn't get to learn my language or have the opportunity. I want that different for kids all around Australia, all around their different countries. I say Australia because that's what people recognise, all over their own countries.
So anybody in your extended family, to your knowledge, still speaks or has carried on the language? Because obviously the main way the language has been carried on is only by the persistence of people who insisted on carrying it on. And there's countless, I'm sure, languages that have died that are no longer used.
Yeah, so that's the international, it's crazy you should say that, it's actually the International Decade of Indigenous Languages for the next 10 years.
Oh, wow. Commencing this year?
Yeah, commencing this year. So I have to do a cheek check. So if you follow somebody like Jacqueline Troy on Twitter, she tweets about, and Felicity Meekins, they're both Aboriginal linguists, because we have under 30 in Australia, under 30 qualified. We have community linguists, which means they've got all their stuff and knowledge about their language but might not know about someone else's language or knowledge. So when we can't dismiss them, they just don't have that same qualification. Then we've got people that have got different academic qualifications but aren't quite linguists because they haven't done all of the units. So it's really this tricky area. But in my family, there is the language centre I work with, they work with, they have like people that go into the schools and teaching all the young kids. So the young kids are getting it. That mob are actually learning it. My sister actually also has learnt it and teaches. My cousin learns and teaches it to us and our family. So we are trying our best. It's documented, it's recorded. There's a whole heap of different packages out there. So there is lots of work. We've actually opened my mob has opened a bilingual school, so which is teaching language, culture and New South Wales education syllabus, combining it all together. So, and it looks really exciting from what I've seen so far. They're actually walking in the bush and learning. So I'm loving seeing what I'm seeing. It makes me so proud.
I imagine it would, and it would be so complex because of the way language evolves over the decades and centuries, and obviously gets diluted by colonialism and our accent. So if you've got people who are learning it and then passing it on and then putting a different inflection or a different accent onto the language, it might not be actually the same as it was.
That's why the linguist and Uncle Gary and Mike Niccolo and all of them are really make sure that they've got some good programs so that they can pick up on it, because we do have I have seen it where there's two or three mobs from the same language group. So Karang, or I won't say that, but I'll say like your Central Desert mobs, there might be similar language, but they might have different words for different things. Yeah. So they might have different ways to say something.
Yeah.
And the difference is we often get people will actually say, well, I'm still learning. Like, wait till I actually really fluently get the language and have the sounds down fluently without having to stop my brain and think, oh, hang on, how does that sound go again? Like when I look at the word, I'll go, barandeb. And it's like, hang on, is that baran or is it something else? You know, like, because I'm having to double check and triple check myself. But where these guys, they don't. They just speak so fluently that it's not changing. But other areas where they're not pronouncing the vowel system right, you can see distinct changes going to happen. So there could be, and what I call, they'll have a direct dismissive or a section or an arm of a new dialect of that same language. As in languages, like if we have a look at the R, at the two R's or the trill at the end of a word, whereas some mob think because it's a R sound, they think it's a R sound. So they think it's an RD sound. So I can see that this happens, but that's called semantic change and what will actually change. And of course, the ever increasing brand new words in the system as well. So like, you know, this moyabangi.
Yeah. And for those playing at home at this point, she's holding up a mobile phone. So that was the Aboriginal word for mobile or cell phone. Now, I should probably also point out that if you can hear some music in the background, it's because my son and a friend of his are recording music upstairs. I'm sorry, that background sound is unavoidable. That's just the way my house rolls. And also this is a point at which we did go off on a bit of a tangent. So when I return to the interview, it's in a completely different space. A lot of the reason for this as well was not just because it's two women scattered brains, also because we had a really bad signal. We've had so much rain here on the eastern seaboard in the last few weeks.
So much rain. Attitude that English speakers have when they go overseas, they begrudge learning languages and stuff. And this, I know it's embarrassing from the point of view of being a white person and talking to people and hear them saying, oh, they don't even speak English. And you go, why would they? You know, why should they? Why wouldn't they want to hang on to their own culture? Like, but it's such a belligerent, arrogant thing that is taught.
Oh, look, it drives me insane because even when I sit in the conferences, my first lot, like this is my first. I haven't even graduated yet, and I'm already talking on a panel next week in regards to just the way the university and academia treats even myself. You know, like I speak fluently, but every now and then I'll drop back into code switch back into Aboriginal English. You know, it's because like we didn't have words like H. People don't get that. We didn't have words like H in our language. There wasn't a consonant. Even though you see it in languages, that's a different we don't have. So we never had H's. So that's why they say he or them. We didn't have T, like, you know, TH. So like it sounds like a D, them. So, you know, like these so we should never be questioned on that. If you understand someone, this is the thing that I say to people. If you understand someone, why are you correcting them? If they've said the wrong word, do you know their hidden disability? Because ultimately I am dyslexic myself, and I've had to have dictionaries. Like when I was younger, I used to get bought and brought. I know.
No, but it's common. It's common. It's done all the time.
There's still things that you carry forth, you know, like they're bought one and brought.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, for me, it's like in my head, and I had people hounding me because I got it wrong every single time. And I'm like, and it just adds to the humiliation, the shame and the trauma, instead of sitting down. And so they brought me a book of differences so that I could understand, because that was my one that I would get confused with. It's like people get confused with affect and effect, like words. If you understand the intent, I don't have a problem with someone picking it up. And as for saying that linguistics actually comes from brown people. I need people to understand this and break that down. It actually comes from Indian people. And I say that in brown people. Because that's the first recording of it, because I have had so many people come up and go westernized, as in referring to European, that European way of being taught. It infuriates me as an Aboriginal person, because so I had to investigate, because they're dismantling my knowledge of what I'm being taught, but it actually has been documented from brown people.
Okay, just to clarify, linguistics as a Western discipline had its roots in ancient India in the study and preservation of sacred texts. The grammarian Panini wrote a description of Sanskrit in about 1500 BC, which apparently is still unexcelled. So there you go. You learn something new every day.
And there's so many commonalities worldwide in certain, particularly like you were saying, the TH and the D sound and all that sort of stuff, and the colonization of the United States, and they've got Akkadian language and other sort of European languages that then mingled with English and then African and French. And there's all of these different, it's just so fascinating. There's a wonderful guy on TikTok as well, SunnM'cheaux, I think his name is.
Link in the show notes.
Yeah, I know who you mean, yeah. And there's another one. There's another guy over there. He's amazing. I love him because I love following them, because I say the same thing, because I've seen kids being picked up on it as well. Like in schools, talking their Aboriginal English, and they get in trouble at school for talking it in the playground. And I'm like, why? Because they have to conform. Why? I don't get it. Why? Why?
It's obviously white supremacy, and there's ableism. We're academically brought up with this system of testing and grading and bullshit. It's like, you know, these markers, if you can read this and add this and do this level, it speaks about your general intelligence. And this is sort of these boxes that they put people in. And I grew up, I think the only thing that I was kind of good at was spelling. When I was younger, I tended to be a bit of a grammar Nazi too, because I would be like, this is all I know is how to spell, and you've spelled wrong. And society told me if people couldn't spell, that meant they weren't very smart. But that was me as a young person thinking, well, at last I can do something that other people can't do. And we're taught to have a hierarchy of being better than other people. And I don't know about you, Deb, in the last 10 years, the idea of unlearning things has become so easy, because it really does feel like you're just taking a layer of bullshit away from what your brain tells you, having lived a long life and learned about the beauty of people, the diversity of people, how prejudice and bias really plays into what you think about a person, not only based on any sort of racial thing, but disability particularly, because we're raised as kids to pick on each other. But I was bullied and picked on as a child. It's sort of a level playing field as a child. Everyone gets picked on. But because we create these hierarchies, as soon as you feel like you have risen to a level where other people aren't going to pick on you, certain people will pick on you, but other people aren't, then you marshal your own troops. And it happens as kids. And I didn't learn anything about racism until I saw other kids being bullied and had to sort of learn from behaviors rather than just sort of, I just remember having no clue, absolutely no clue, and just noticing that people were mean and thought, does that mean that I'm supposed to be mean? Like, I'm talking about when I'm 4, 5, 6 years of age and not having any clue. And then you learn all this crap and then you associate with people who are bigots or whatever and you just got no clue. It's so easy to grow up in Australia with blinkers and blinders and not see anything until one day you see it, and it's like in Pleasantville when it's black and white 1 minute, it's colour the next. Once you see things, you can't unsee them. And and it changes you.
And it's so true because, like, in our era, the things that were acceptable are definitely not acceptable. Yeah. Like, I'm saying, like, we grew up on, like, when I talk to people about this, we grew up on shows that were like Ma and Pa Kettle, Petticoat Junction, because I grew up in the country, so we only had one channel, 2 channels.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, like, the things that they put on TV, we grew up with a black and white minstrel show on the TV. And my dad, I remember my dad sitting there saying, hey, like, he goes, look at these fellas. They think there's too tricky trying to be black fellas, eh?
And love thy neighbour. Love thy neighbour.
Yeah, Kings of Country.
Yeah,
like, and it was like that's what formed us, So, like, I mean, or our kids' shows were things like Pigsy, Monkey. I'm just saying it's Wombles. Like, if you go back and look at it, like, that made up our environment. Like, the things, smoking was on TV, drinking was on TV.
I grew up on number 96 and The Box, so that was my sex education.
Didn't we? I don't remember number 96, but people talk about it all the time, and I'm like, don't remember that one.
Yeah. They rave on it about the first lesbian kiss, the first homosexual kiss, first bisexual kiss. They all happened on Australian television in the early 70s.
Well, there you go.
Well, before it was in America. Probably happened in Europe plenty of times, but, Another tangent.
If I understood what I knew now, God, I would have spoken up a lot more about different things. Because I used to sit there and go, oh, yeah, boys will be boys, because that's how we grew up. That's how I grew up. Boys were boys, I grew up in a time where we weren't allowed, women and mothers and children weren't allowed in the pub when I lived in Ipswich. Yeah. We weren't allowed in the pub. We weren't. It was only a male-dominated area. I still grew up in that.
Yeah. There was a ladies' lounge, I think.
There was a ladies' lounge.
Yeah.
There was a ladies' lounge. It was very separated.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that until, like, because I'm kind of on the autistic bordering, I'm on autistic ADHD kind of thing, so it's like for me some of this stuff didn't sink in, so it's taking me a lot longer.
It's not logical, so of course it's not going to. That's the thing, is that even when things are accepted and people go, yeah, I accept that because it's accepted, I think it's really cool that there's still other people that just go, well, actually it makes no sense to me regardless of what you say, and it's because it's logic.
Exactly.
So how much of your culture did you grow up with as a very young person?
Well, it's funny because we weren't allowed to practice it, and it's true, we weren't allowed to practice it, but in ways, like, the more I talk about it on social media, the more and more comes out of different stories that happened and different things that my dad subtly taught us without even me being aware. Like, things that I thought were normal are actually cultural, my dad also gave me different things. Like, I grew up around my Aboriginal family my whole life. It's not to say that, hey, they haven't been around. It's just we hear my stories of my auntie saying, my dad wouldn't teach us, her dad wouldn't teach her that. Granny wouldn't teach us that. Like, this is the stories that they're getting told. So you can imagine if they're not getting told, they're not teaching us. But when I was about before I left. So in my 20s, 30s, early 30s, in between late 20s, early 30s, my dad started getting involved with some stuff on the ground. So I would come home and it really just reopened what memories of like the culture and understanding. And it was always a pleasure, like to be involved in that. It was always felt like that was my duty. But my best lesson my dad ever gave me was actually making sure that you have to keep going, like no matter what. Like, so, they'd go and party a little bit too much, never had enough money left over. So we went and did our cultural thing by going down to the beach, go worming, get the worms, sell half of them to the local shop so they could sell it on to other people, and then that would be used to get bread and milk and stuff like that. And then we'd go fishing, we'd get our fish, come back home and cook the fish, and then, of course, the bones would then go back into the net, and that would be used for our burley again. So, like, it was just that cycle. Dad grew vegetables at home and always had veggie patches because, like, that was important. At least we'd have veggies and things like that. So this is, Dad would go and help out somebody just to maybe get a couple of bucks or something. My dad so he taught me that. My dad taught me that from a young age. So even though I sit there and think, oh, did I really grow up in it? And then I look at it today and I go, like, that's an experience that people will never get, that have never gotten it. Fishing on the beach at night time, making not noise, showing the phosphorus in the sand. These memories just always make me happy. Those memories just take me to a time that you just sit there and think that, like, and we did everything together as a family. It was never, Dad sometimes went fishing late at night when it was later because it might have been the right time of the moon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But most of the time, like, we did everything as a family. There was nothing done singular.
That's wonderful.
That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They're great memories to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you enjoy your teen years and stuff?
Funnily enough, you were talking about it earlier. So when I went to a school with 32 kids in the school, so, and then all of a sudden in year 6, they discovered that I was Aboriginal and I was different. And I just thought I was just like, most people, like all the kids, because we're all dark, like we all had tans, summer kids by the beach. We all were out swimming. And
so what suburb were you in then?
Scott's Head.
Scott's Head, all right. Yeah, I know it, yeah. Okay.
I grew up in lovely little town, Scott's Heads, and I loved it as a kid. Like, my dad would dig up the backyard and would have hungies and cookouts and stuff from the backyards of the bowling club,
Yeah.
even though it's not So there was just many things. Oh gosh. But when we hit grade 6, I got copped a lot. Like, you're Aboriginal and it's all of a sudden things started changing. And then I went to high school, and because I was late, we weren't there, we were in Queensland. So I got to school late, so in high school, so I struggled to find my identity. But then also I would always want to feel safe because I didn't know whether I was allowed to have new friends or old friends. I didn't know where to sit. Some of my family, I was at school with my older sisters, kind of, so I sort of hung around her. But then my other sister and my cousins and that wouldn't recognise me or wouldn't acknowledge me. And it was like, and so it was a real struggle walking between the two worlds of westernised world and my mob. It was a real big struggle of to where to fit in, because I just wanted to be a kid. And, I didn't realise how much until older that, setting myself up in an environment where I had 5 different groups of friends and I would just move and sit so I would never have attachment to any of them, kind of thing.
Yeah. Your own personal identity would have been obviously fractured, and we tend to, as you say, code switch and be a certain person to certain people. So at what age did you sort of get to a point where you felt more able to be authentic rather than appease? I've
always been authentic, but people kept telling me, like, I had to be somebody else. So it's all my whole life, including employers, have said I'm the rough diamond, I'm the diamond in the rough, and I need to be polished because I don't quite make society. And I've always struggled with that, is like, why aren't I good enough for that? You know, why do they need to feel the need to do that? You know, it wasn't always pretty. There was some really dark times. I'm going to say there was really a lot of dark times as well.
Yeah.
It's certainly not like the most of my family. I'm very much different, and I've always said that I'm going to succeed. Not to say that they're not going to succeed, but virtually, you know, very strong-willed, and I've always been very strong-willed, and that's been half my problem. Because I won't let anyone that tells me I can't do something, I'll say, here, let me show you how I'll do it, and I'll just get it out, dig my heels in, and I'll get it done just to prove my point. I'm that stubborn.
Stubborn, you're tenacious is what you are.
Yeah, probably.
Persistent. See, there's negative connotations to stubborn, but persistent and tenacious, and you know those are the words you want to reframe and just sort of, you know.
Yeah. So when I bought my house, I think is when I stopped really pandering down to people, but then also like people were supposed to come and help me in my house, and then they didn't show up. So I don't have attachments to the house as much anymore, because like it's just this, why do people do that, you know? So I just sit there and go, oh, well, like, and I just let go of everything, you know, like I didn't care if people thought my house was messy. I didn't care if, you know, if people thought I wasn't, you know, I walk around in a sarong most of the time, and I don't care whether people like that or not. That's just who I am now, you know, like I don't care. I think in the last few years I've really let down my barriers a lot more and going, I really just don't care.
Isn't it great?
You know, it is great, but you lose things along the way. And like I'm from university, I'm learning, and from being on TikTok, and I will actually own a lot to TikTok. Because of the education of learning from people and watching and understanding and going, oh, hang on, is that what happens, or is that what happens? But self-awareness is really important, and aware that you've got, like when I found out I was on the spectrum as an example, that was like a huge relief, because now I had something to say, this is me, guys. I can't, you know, I keep thinking, well, how can I better improve? I remember many times I've been to a speech pathologist because somebody said, Debbie, you're way too loud, you know, or kept getting told to be quiet. Like this is what kind of movement I can't handle now, because for years, you know, and people go, oh, but I'm telling you to be quiet. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand what that's doing to me. And that tenacity to keep going has been my driving force, because I don't want to fail at this. I want to prove. And now that my cousin's dropped out and another friend's dropped out, I really want to achieve at it, but I'm finding it hard.
So you're doing it mainly on your own now?
I do it with a tutor. If I didn't have the tutor, I would not survive. If I did not have a tutor, I would not survive. And I think now I'm actually I found this university here that's going to allow me to use their space, which is also going to be beneficial for me, because now because I have this problem of being at home and working and learning. My ADH brain just doesn't allow it. It happens, but as long as someone's holding my hand. And that's not good. That's not a good way to be. Not loathing, but, you know, lack of self-confidence in some things. And lack of experience on hands-on, because I'm real hands-on. Somebody says to me, go and watch a YouTube. You can watch that YouTube and you'll understand it. I can't understand.
You have to do the thing to learn it.
Exactly. That's how universities and Western education system needs to unpack that for everyone.
Absolutely.
When I talk about my stuff of decolonizing, this is what I talk about, and that's what I'm going to be talking about on the panel next week, because they hear, oh, hang on, you're dyslexic, so just get the reading and write down dictaphone thing. That'll fix you. Go, no, I have problems constructing the sentences. But you can talk about it really well. I said, yes, I can, but when it goes to paper, it's like something just, I can't do it. It's really hard.
Abstract thought is my favorite thing, is the idea that if the other person understands your abstract way of thinking in the same way, you could be speaking gibberish. It wouldn't matter, because you're on the same wavelength. And it's the same with learning, and we know so much more about learning. We know so much more about ADHD and ASD, and still there's so much we don't know. But at least we've created a space of awareness and tolerance that if we just do things a little bit different so that everyone can understand, how is that not beneficial for everyone?
Time to pivot.
Obviously, I'm white and I've grown up in a colonialised country and all this sort of stuff. And regardless of how I feel emotionally about race, I'm conditioned to screen my privilege out until the day that I went, oh, and had that light bulb come on. And for me, it's been an incremental journey over the last, I want to say 30 years roughly, but it's like I say, it's been an incremental journey. When my kids were young, I went to a mother's group, and we decided we're going to have discussion groups. I don't know where we got the resource material from, but someone got this material. We were all distributed with stuff to read, and then we come back and discuss it. And the first subject we covered was the White Australia policy.
Yep.
And I had no idea. Like I had zero idea. I was in my early 20s. Oh, no, by that stage I was my mid to late 20s. That not only was it a policy, but it was not even hidden that it was the White Australia policy. It was inscribed in law, and the way that we
clubs, places where you could go. You didn't see those signs.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
And who we invited to the country and gave them money to come to the country prior to talking about immigration, but just the settlement of the continent and everything that happened.
But even 1980s when Liz Hancock was on the radio and saying, oh, you know, if they all come and assimilate, if they all come along and assimilate in the country, then they'll be fine. And if not, we'll just put poison in the water and kill the others off. Like, that's in the 80s, man, 1980s.
Oh, shit. Mm.
We're watching that. After the policy is passed, we're watching this on TV.
Yeah, yeah.
We're watching it. And they're like, people, like, it's like people kind of want to bury their head in the sand, and I've noticed this with my friend as well. But, I can understand what you're saying. You wouldn't have been aware because you've never grown up with it. And that's that same thing.
I grew up in the southern beaches of Sydney, so it's like very, very white bread. Like I think there was like a few Aboriginals went to my school when I was in primary school in the southern beaches and stuff. And there was fuck all taught to us about any of it. In high school, we started learning about things like the Holocaust. Like I remember being 13, 14 and seeing a mini-series, and they showed it to us in class time about the Holocaust. Looking back on that now and just realising that we were taught that retrospect.
And straight away when you say that, like the Holocaust, and here's our black mob going over there, like our mob going over there, fighting for the country that they believe in as well, fighting because they're going to get given this opportunity to have land, fighting to help free this mob because they thought it was wrong as well, and they promised all these types of things to come back and just still be rejected. And that's just as simple as I can put it, virtually. So it's just how the things can be different, and it's interesting to see. It'd be interesting to do. I've just seen a vision pop in my head of like a timeline of events, how white Australia grew up and how black Australia grew up. It would have been nice to see that. I can see something with a timeline, kind of. Very different growing up. So therefore you end up with very big, advocates of what we do now, like big advocates because of the way we grew up. We've had to be. We were born. As soon as we came out of our mothers, we were born to be advocates. And we didn't have a choice. Yeah. We didn't get this choice. We have to be because we have to fight it on all levels. And I struggle when I see politicians allowed to carry on with their stupid behaviour like Pauline Hanson. I struggle when she does and says things that she does as a human. This isn't just me as being Aboriginal this is as a human, the way that she, I can sit there and say I've had extreme bias as well growing up in Sydney for 20 years, myself in my 20s, and I just got on and did life. You just didn't worry. People mostly accepted me for who I was. An occasional one or two, but mostly they just accepted me as Deb. That's all they saw me as. They didn't see me as Deb the Aboriginal, Deb they just saw me as a person. So as I said, with bits and pieces that weren't, but ultimately, we grow up having to defend. But if anyone comes at me and says all black fellas are drunks, I just lose my shit over that.
Yeah.
It's like, crazy.
Yeah. I just just learning. Like I say, I've always thought of myself as not racist until I actively started following creators and there's very specific thought leaders that really, really get to the heart of what's wrong and the heart of what causes people to reject what's right in front of them, like the truth and the reality that's right in front of them, and somehow manage to put things in words that I believe if more people could listen to these particular people, the better off everyone would be, because I think how can they not reach everybody?
So you have to explain it like you're going back to school, like when I talk about that, like when we talk about systemic racism. So we talk about, people go, there's no systemic racism. And, they've got, ALOs in systems and stuff. They've got people that work with Aboriginal people, and it's still not fixing the problem. But that's not the problem. It's not the people. It's where you can get the dollars, where you can get the funding, where you can have the right services put into place. It's about it's talking about with the unrealistic selection criteria that you have to meet for the government. It's, as an example, I always talk about my story about me sitting on my local, we got land back, right?
Yeah.
So we got land back. We got our national park back. It's Gulpilil National Park, and we got it handed back. Now, it's wonderful. Now, we got told for us to get that land back, we had to lease it back to National Park. So we have to lease it back to National Park. Remember that. But National Park and the auspicing, they auspice the money, which means they hold the money, which means they then take a fee from that money to auspice the money that we get given for the lease to go back into the National Park. So we don't actually have the money. It's still National Park. It's just a title transfer.
So it's money in theory.
Yeah, it's not money that we get. People think we get royalties. I know in some parts of the countries there are places that do get royalties, but not in New South, not with my mob. So then they tell us the rules and try and manipulate and guide us, even though we've got a council, we've got a board, and guide us to what their direction is anyway. And when I tried this once, I know I went up against my auntie once, and I went we've got people that want to leave their job and work and take care of country, and they get the opportunity to do that, but they can only do it casually. So they'll train them so that they can go and work in national parks elsewhere. But when it came to them having a job at the end of it, no, they still would have had to apply or wait or go elsewhere to get the job. So not actually become a Gungal ranger. And then we can't just go and camp there anytime we want, even though it's our land. We have to still seek permission, which is, I can kind of understand that ruling and, making it fair and everything like that. But when people say go back to your country and start to learn, this is the rule. We can't just go back. We can't just go and do whatever we want.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to.
Oh, God.
Okay, go and watch Charlie's Country. Within the first 5 minutes, I was so angry. Here's the perfect example of Charlie's Country. First 5 minutes in Charlie's Country, he goes off. He's going into the bush and he shoots, because that's a new weapon of the thing. Goes off in the gun in the bush and he shoots something for tucker, brings it back to the tribe, the mob, And this is David Gulpilil. And then he brings it back to the tribe, and the police officers are there and said, Charlie, you can't have that. That's not registered. The guns, it's not right. We've got to. So he takes the gun. Okay, so we're talking about hunting, gathering again. So then he goes, oh, well, bugger this, and he still wants to keep up his traditional ways. So then he goes back out and he goes back in and he makes a spear. A spear to go traditional hunting with. Copper pulls up and goes, no, Charlie, you can't have that. We'll take that because there's been trouble elsewhere. So once again, to go, so tell me, when everything is taken off you, how you are supposed to be in, how is the system not, we have these international rights that says we're allowed to act and practice our culture as much as we want to, but then the system says, no, you can't. Only when we choose you to be able to practice it, only then can you do it. So camping, like the mob here go camping, they can only go camping at Christmas time because it's only the time that they'll allow them to camp out there.
Personally, I don't know how you just don't get angry and depressed and, all the time.
Absolutely. And this is the problem is then when that's constantly happening and you're trying to deal with families and they've got run-ins to say with the police for kids, for kids or like themselves or anything, then this is completely happening. Then you can imagine what they're feeling. That's what I'm saying. This is just at a basic level, let alone just that's basic fishing or, or going somewhere, So it's like, well, then the system, it says, well, hang on, if they don't want to, say, go and work, and they want to practice their life by going hunting and gathering, well, the law says, well, hang on, you have to have a license to go fishing. The law says you have to have a license to go hunting, shooting or hunting. There's a law that says this. So the law doesn't allow our natural way of life to actually happen. It says that we have to pay taxes. It says that we have to pay housing. It says that we have to pay these things. So we can't live that life because we can't just go camping on the bush because then we're illegal camping. These are the levels, basic down to it. And I used to sit there and say myself sometimes, then, if you've got the skill, then go and live it like that. But it's not as simple as that because we're still attached to this system and the system is not designed for us. It is extremely hard to work in communities and then we have our own lateral violence that happens in our communities too because the ones that, that can't see that we're trying to help will always have, because of the systemic system that's happened to them, then they take that on you and you're trying to, and then if they're hanging around mob and they're saying something different, so this is that whole, it's like this for them and you're trying to help them and you're trying to break through that and sometimes you just can't. You just got to walk with them for this time and then hope they can get through. And if I could bring back language for them to see their culture in language and see how, and get it to grow in them and that seed and that being able to walk down the street and say something in language that these fellas might not know, like if I can turn around and go, Nimbugaraba, Nimbugaraba, Euron or whatever, like big stupid ass, kind of thing. And without them knowing what it is, like I think that's even more powerful because they can have a little bit of a joke because us black fellas like a joke. So you could make a joke out of it, but it actually, when you connect, it spiritually unlocks layers within inside your body because all of a sudden you want to have more, you want to do more, you want to help kids, you want to, you want to be better that way, like I have, for me personally, my job on TikTok is done when a lady's now going to university. Well, she said it's because of me, but, I don't know. It could be because she got good at it. Yeah. But I've got now a niece that sent me a message who I have never known, and she sent me a message and said that she's now going on to school and going to encourage the kids and show them how to be better because of me being on TikTok, like that's the result I want. Yeah.
I strongly relate to that. What's the point of being an older person and learning the hard lessons, learning the tough lessons and knowing, looking back in retrospect and seeing, there's two ways of looking at something distinctly, and one is a blinkered view and the other one is a broad horizon of complexity where you actually don't know everything there is to know about the person based on their gender, their age, their race. If we see each other more for who we are, we need to teach, obviously, from a very, very young age, like from day dot. Always get people to question what's in front of them and the way they think, and always get people to be curious rather than shutting out what they don't understand. Instead, give people the tools to ask questions about what they don't understand. But
it's the environment as well. Like if the environment, we need to make them feel comfortable in their environment. If they're not feeling safe in their environment, like I talk about language and I say it's really good for us to teach the language to our kids at school. That's fantastic. My always concern is that they need it at home. They need it at home because then they can lose it. If they're not learning it and teaching it, then that's my thing. It has to be, we talk about holistic. That's holistic for me, is including the home environment. So me being on Zoom, I go on Zoom lessons every week to teach it and practice it. I'm actually setting up a schedule with another TikToker because they've been inspired from me as well. And I'm going to be setting up from them weekly Zooming lessons to talk and yarn between each other without the teachers to try and get it right, so we don't feel overwhelmed and bowed, because it's going to take me years. But I reckon give me 10 years and I'll be able to almost look at most languages, because it's all about sounds, and once you know how the vowel system or their language works, then you can kind of understand it.
Yeah.
And you can
kind of like Italian and Spanish has certain similarities, and like Germanic and English, and that's right. Like that's what people. I love it when people go, "Oh, you can't even speak English." I said, "You can't even speak English. It's not even your language." I love it when they come at me with that, because it's like. We're a total amalgamation of so many different dialects. So
English stole everything. Like English. Well, I say still in my TikToks, but it's like anything borrowed. Like I asked a Maori creator how they would incorporate our word phonetically into their language. So it's really good.
Yeah, well, even the pronunciation of Maori is like we learned it. Yeah, we learned Maori.
Maori,
Maori. Speaking of what to call people, do we feel that First Nations sort of covers it now for most Indigenous cultures?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't.
Okay.
Because it's still the rhetoric. I get I get the motion, and I understand it. But it still gives the loophole of them saying it's still so closely related to, like here in One Nation. So I hear that. Then we still got somebody say, well, we were the First Nation because, this nation, Australia, didn't exist until rule came along. So I hate that I live in a bubble, and I've been cushioned by, I don't know, just living in my own existence, my own world, my own community. But wherever I've lived, and I've lived in a few different places in New South Wales, I've been married twice, so I've been, having complete existences for like a decade and a half and then moving somewhere else. As soon as I got into creative communities, that's when the floodgates of diversity opened up for me in so many ways, because of the diverse people that are creative. That's the common thread. I feel so blessed. I knew I wanted to be creative, but didn't know I could be. I thought you had to be creative from a young age, or grow up in a gifted family or a lucky family that could send you to good schools, and then you could maybe become an actor or whatever. So somehow I stumbled my way into these things by virtue of just loving music and loving theatre and just finding my feet. Once the veil was lifted and you see the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain working all this white supremacy shit, once you see it, I don't understand why you wouldn't feel sad and guilty and want, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to turn around to someone and say, I'm sorry that happened to you. It doesn't even occur to me. But you've got this white fragility thing that is like, oh, well, don't teach us things that is going to make us think we're bad people. Don't teach our children to think that they're bad people, and it's going on in America. We don't want to teach our children to hate themselves. And you're like, but you raised other people to hate themselves. White people raised other people to be, vilified and divided and all that. And they don't seem to be able to see that. You're absolutely right. But the thing is by not teaching it, We're still doing, but also once again, I feel like we're setting up young kids again, whether you're teaching it on one side or the other. So for instance, the white kid at the school gets taught this as a great understanding, goes home, his parents still very much racist. Still got to live with it.
Yeah.
Still got to live with it. This is where, like, because I come from a background of working with kids and seeing what happens to them, and being, a kid that, through the system itself has been, not valued. So I sit there and I think about that and think, well, what are we doing for these kids?
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's only people that are self-motivated to learn. What I've been doing with my podcasts and stuff, I've been talking about sex, orgasm, and for a while there I did a whole series of different things about consent, right?
Yep.
So I've spoken to consent educators, and one of them teaches children from a very young age about body autonomy, whether or not you want to hug someone and all.
Yeah, that's the basic thing.
Yeah, all these
people still try and do that to me, and I go, please don't do that. As a child protection worker, I'm like, if they don't want to hug me, I'm not going to ask them to hug me.
Yeah,
please don't do that.
Pivot.
So I knew that we'd probably just hit the ground running and start talking, and I feel a lovely connection. I think you probably projected out to your audience on TikTok. I feel this lovely connection. I'm very, very lucky that I've been able to develop lovely relationships with the people that I podcast with that are become ongoing friendships. But I wanted to ask you, because on TikTok you've got to find a niche, and because it's so heavily censored, I'm sort of steering away from sex education and sexuality and certain things.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a new thing.
Steering away. I'm trying to do it in my own way, but I'm sort of leaning into the anti-ageism sort of vibe, and that seems to be where people are resonating and enjoying what I'm doing. And same with Instagram. They're like, that's sort of how people come to know me, going, regardless of what I'm saying, if they see someone of a certain age say things and realise that not everybody necessarily is a cardboard cutout of their generation just by virtue of being a certain age, that you can actually communicate with people from everywhere and from all walks of life just by having your eyes open and all that.
All my friends, nieces and nephews, friends love hanging out with me because I don't act my age. So we're supposed to act a certain age.
There
are moments where I do.
Fuck that.
Where I tell them to stop being a bunch of bloody dickheads, you know.
Yeah.
They don't like it when I act my age then. But I have found it, and I found that this app is a bit ageist in the way that they do things.
Well, it's mostly kids, and if the algorithm works so well that you can pretend that everything doesn't exist beyond what is on the For You page. You can sort of, there are no bigots and misogynists and rapey teenagers, and they're not out there. There's just activists, BIPOC creators and LGBT creators and all that sort of stuff. But what I wanted to ask you, because in the world, the concept of elders, when I was one of the theatrical productions I was involved in was actually a fundraiser. I won't go into it because there's a lot, but I've spoken about it before on the podcast, but it's called V-Day, and it's an anti-violence movement thing. And it was in 2007, and we had a production, and this was the first time anyone said to me, even though I was aware of it, welcome to country and acknowledgement of country, even though I was aware in a peripheral way of what that might be, this was the first time I was involved in something where we actually invited a local auntie, and this was on the Central Coast in Gosford, Darkinjung country, and we had the acknowledgement and, just gave such like deferential treatment to this auntie. I've forgotten her name. I feel terrible, but I've forgotten her name. But this was the first time that I ask myself, why do we do this? And then have to think, of course we do. I have to have this sort of moment of realization of this acknowledgement of country and what it's all about. So that was the first time I had it introduced to me. But the idea of elders, and as a young person growing up, I was fascinated by Native American culture And I probably knew more about Native American culture than I knew about Aboriginal culture. I knew more about everything American than I knew about everything Australian. I could probably name more American presidents than I could name prime ministers when I was a kid, right? It's changing as I get older. But when I was a kid, like you say, all of the media and everything was from the UK and the US. And it was only after a certain period of time that there was laws put in place that there had to be a certain percentage of Australian content on television. And now with SBS, we have multicultural content and all this sort of stuff, but it's been a slow process. But the idea of elders, like in so-called Western civilization, older people, we look after them as best we can, and then we shunt them off into a nursing home sort of thing, or what it seems to, or people get laughed at when they get older. There's no sense of extra respect for elders. And then you see in anything to do with Native American culture that, the person who is the most revered person is the elder person, I think, regardless of whether they were male or female as well. Just the elder person was the one who says, oh, well, this is how it's going to be because that's their decision, and it wouldn't be questioned. And in Asian countries, subcontinent and stuff, the extended family revolves around the parents, and the parents raise the children, and then the children automatically look after the parents. There's just such respect for elders. And we would say it, Mum would say, respect your elders. It was like this cliche that she would say, not realising that nobody really took that very seriously. So for you to grow up in this colonised nation, but always having contact with your culture and automatically understanding this elder thing, has it either influenced you growing up looking forward to being an older person and to having that elder status? And when does that happen? Like, I was like, when does someone know that they're an elder?
So according to Australian standards, it's 50. Just so you know, but it's not how it works. And when I grew up, there's talks now, and many people will say an elder is not classed by age. It's not classed by age. It's classed, an elder is classed like knowledge, or when you were given knowledge that is valuable and taught. I know people that are young that are elders, but they can't talk about it because we've got this now colonised way of thinking elders means.
Oh, right.
To grow into my auntie status, as what I call it. I call it an auntie status.
Yep.
And that status is it's a very hard role, because I will say it's really hard, especially as an auntie that hasn't had children herself, because it's one where you can see both sides of an argument happening between a mother and a daughter, or a father and a son or something, but you can also see your own self, but you have to learn to love them differently and realise, I suppose, a lot of your own ego as a single person. You have to let go of a lot of ego for them and let them make their mistakes without telling them. Yeah. And that's come from years of my work, of what I've done. And I tell people today, if they're not going to listen, you can't make them listen. Do you listen when someone's telling you? So
that's kind of what parents learn eventually, is that they have to let their kids make their own mistakes.
And and I will do that with my friends. I'm bluntly honest, to the point that my friends sometimes they're like, Debbie, I said, well, why do you come here then if you don't want to hear what I'm saying? I'm blunt as to them, and I say, well, I'm telling you, you need to heal, or you need to do this, but ultimately, if you don't, I'm still here, but it's just this is what I think you need to do. This is what I think you need to do. Not that you need, I think you need to do this.
Yeah.
For me, I have honour and grace hanging around my aunties, and don't worry, they still up me. Oh, I'm 50, and when I see them, and if I've done something wrong, they up me. Deborah. And they call me my real name, and it's like, oh, they're the only ones allowed to call me my name. So when they pass, no one else can call. When they've all passed, I will even deliberately go and change my name to be not known as that. While my elders are alive, I'm not considered an elder, and some people I may never be considered an elder. because the cultural knowledge for some things. I have some knowledge. I'll always be an elder to my nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
That's what I say. But if others want to treat me as an elder, that's up to them, because of the way that they are and their upbringing. But to me, it was always older than us. We had to respect those ones older than us. But respect is earned, not given.
Yeah.
That is something that sometimes people don't realise. Respect is earned and not given.
Absolutely.
Because there are also people in our communities that aren't so nice, and I could say that there are some not nice people in our communities, and therefore they would not have the same level of respect.
Yeah, do you get to be involved at a ceremonial level in regards to being an elder? I have no idea what I mean by that question, except I kind of know what I mean by that question.
I'm lucky enough that the local community here have allowed me to dance with them whenever they dance. So I feel very privileged, and I'm kind of like the oldest one on the dance floor. Well, I'm not. No, I'm not. There is other ones older than me, but to be a part of that, to be asked to be a part of that, that's taken me a long time. And the person can sometimes get in trouble or get some flack because they've asked me to dance, but people are now starting to accept that I'm here. So it'll be like me going to another community. I wouldn't be automatically asked to go and participate in their stuff. I would have to be asked, and I'd have to be an observer, just like any other person. I've still got to walk with tread like a white fellow walking into a community. Do you know what I mean? Like I might be black, but I'm just saying ultimately it's about patience, time, not rushing in, learning. I've got to walk just as gentle as what a white fellow would have to go into a community.
You've got a lot of responsibility that being betwixt the two worlds, and that do you take the responsibility on, or do you feel like people put it on to you?
I will always defend my people. Always defend my people until the cows come home. But I will also look at each and every incident on its own merit. I won't just bundle all the things together. I have to look at it one-on-one, and I have to process it myself for my own opinion. I won't just jump on somebody else's bandwagon. There are certain, and I won't say, but there are certain subjects that I just won't talk about with people because I don't believe in them. And that's okay. Okay. That's when to know when to speak and when not to speak.
Yeah. You've got your limits.
Yeah. I do. There are things that I will. And my thing is I think I want people on say TikTok as a platform to be able to have their voice and their creativity and their wondrous way of life. I've also got to let the younger ones know that they've come into this world now, that they've also got to remember to help the elders again, if that makes sense. It's like this circle. It's this circle that's got to come back around because we live, everything is in a circle. I think in life that as we move on, and I've done it too, as I've gotten older, I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with all my aunties, but I made time to spend time with my aunties. But as they grow, I can see now, my nieces and nephews are in their life and they're in their world, and I can see that they don't see value in me as an auntie. They see value as invite me to all the functions, but they don't value me just yet because they're in their life. They've got their kids and they're growing up and that's what they're doing, and they don't think outside that. I'm not in that spectrum because we were grown up as a collective, but not really. Does that make sense?
Younger people are very self-absorbed, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just the way it is. It's, they're learning how to be people, so they're just surviving within their own paradigms and their own little, how do I get through life with people liking me or whatever it is, or acceptance, or, how do I do things like everyone else? And then you get older and you go, actually, how do I do things the way I want to do them and what's inside me? You'd sort of learn that after about 30.
Yeah, but it's also the other part of actually, understanding that I'm a person as well. I'm a person. I'm a whole person who has feelings and emotions. I'm just not. And it's a hard concept for a lot of people. So I've learned that I can't talk to younger ones about my problems or things without their using their own personal non-experience in my experience level body. But yeah, it's been wonderful having a yarn with you. It's been wonderful yarning with someone like in my age category. You know what I mean?
And I don't get to do it very often, and you're probably the same. You don't get to do it very often. Yeah. But just thank you for everything that you're doing.
So this was the awkward moment in the recording where I needed to sign off, but we were going to continue talking after I pressed stop.
But I will say goodbye so that we've got that ending. So it was
bye. And
yes.
I will also leave you. I'll do something else for you. Okay, so we'll say I say yarang.
Yarang. Giddy gay now is hello. Yes.
Yes, Guinea Gay is how are you? Yeah, Guinea Gay is how are you? Yeah. So now it's like Yarrung. So like, but it's really funny because everyone says Guinea Gay now. So it's really good. Like it's just that one word. So now I have to do other words to try Nayam. So I'm trying to do Nayam. So I am. About to release a video on that. But so now you've also got Guinea Gay Nayam Barandeb.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it so much. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.
So that is how that went. We had such a lovely chat. Apologies again for the occasional technical difficulties and the tangents that we went off on. It was a tricky thing to edit, but hopefully you got the vibe. And the vibe is that we were just two middle-aged women having a natter over the fence while we're shelling peas or whatever. It sort of felt like that at different times, especially when we talk about how things were in the old days. The older you get, the more vivid your very, very earliest memories are. It's not even nostalgia, it's just these memories that come to the surface, and sometimes they catch you quite unprepared because it's sounds and smells and sense memory of those days. It's just really refreshing to talk to people around your vintage who remember specific things in a specific way, and they remind you of things. And I can't describe it to you, but I have a feeling you understand what I'm talking about, or you will one day. Don't forget to check the show notes for the various references that were made throughout the podcast. I will pop them in. I suggest if you're on TikTok or Instagram, follow Debbie. I'll drop both of those links in as well. And once you're following Debbie, have a good look at who she's following and who's following her, and follow those people too. The more we look outside our own very short-sighted and narrow-minded viewpoint of things, the better off everyone is and the richer our lives are. Yes, I will jump off my fucking pedestal and my podium, my lectern, my pulpit, my soapbox, and wish you all very well. I've got a feeling the next podcast will be out sometime next month. I do have someone in mind to talk to. Keep an eye on my social media to see what that's going to be about, but I'm going to talk to people that take me out of my comfort zone for a while. I hope you enjoyed it. Please send me a DM. Message me at theeloquentintheroom@gmail.com. And yeah, let's keep these conversations going. I'm just trying to expand my own communities and in the process help everyone expand theirs as well. Lots of love, big hugs, but only with your permission. How did it go again? Oh yeah, Yarrung. Did I get that right, Deb? Talk to you soon.